Hello, let's skip the intro, shall we? I lied. So, Blademasters rock.
Now go, my son, and ride!
Yes, they do. This video was partly brewing in my head for a while as a part of an overall design retrospective journey thing, and partly inspired by a recent convo on Discord, which jolted my memory. So, given my recent broad inspection of Hellgate's classes at the time of the TC, I figured now was as good a time as any. Now, I don't mean that Blademasters rock in terms of efficiency. They do perform magnificently in their TC form, but that's not today's subject. What I'm a fan of is the conceptual design, and here's what, in my opinion, makes it great. There's very little fluff, there are clear lines, and choices matter. Synergy and balance levels are solid, and there's actually significant building freedom. So let's start tab by tab, rather tree by tree, and make the relevant connections as we go along. So, the charge tree. Mobility options that can be tremendously useful with few points, or invested into further. Charge and path function differently, to the point where one is essentially offensive, while the other is arguably defensive. It can act as a panic button anyway. Flagship recognized this usefulness as they included said skills into the Templar TC set. The Sword of Reckoning tree. A clearly single-target tree with clear-cut functions. Sword of Reckoning provides a single-target spam skill. Sword of Authority provides a slower single-target attack that can pronounce elemental effects one might be using. Hamper applies a single-target debuff that's useful both for the user and their team. Balance of Power enhances Hamper with power draining, essentially stabilizing damage output. So in direct contrast comes the Sword of Justice tree. Sword of Justice allows for pseudo AoE damage in close quarters. Fast multiple strikes also synergize fantastically with surges, which were changed from on kill to on hit during the TC. Sweeping Strike provides self-centered AoE damage. Whirlwind, I can't pronounce Whirlwind. English isn't my first language. Whirlwind continues the AoE theme, while fusing it with a mobility boost. So to juxtapose the two, the former tree promotes single target, less mobile and more power-efficient gameplay, while the latter provides AoE damage and mobility. The point demands of both, along with other skills that are too useful to not get, frankly, make this an actual choice. The player can't have both. Speaking of appealing skills and expanding on what appeal the latter skill tree would have in a game of gargantuan bosses. Surges. Passive, on-hit skills, by the time of the TC anyway, that provide three key utilities. Restoration provides healing, Wrath provides critical chance for the more offensive builds, and Speed provides more mobility. All three benefit from Surge Mastery, which increases their chance to trigger. Furthermore, Restoration and Wrath also received chain skills during the TC, Templar Restoration and Crusader Wrath, respectively. Those skills require and use up surges that, naturally, that the player has built up to provide an instant boost to what the base surges provide, health and damage. In theory, this would make for the perfect class that has it all. As before though, the weights build would never allow one player to have it all at once, thus choices are impactful and builds matter. Those aside, a particularly curious skill pair comes in the form of Call of the Chosen and Angelic Orator. Call provides a unique mix of a single target taunt and AoE fear, centered on the taunt. Orator augments this further, allowing the skill to also debuff a single target's attack power. Thus the pair theoretically fits all playstyles, while providing a unique utility of both crowd control and a single target debuff. This pair was always far less popular than other options, and given all the other great options, that's understandable. However, the pair was sound conceptually, and even in terms of lore. It reinforced the fact that Guardians and Blademasters are both Templars who have similar tactics. The Crosscutter tree. Now, Crosscutter itself might seem to be more of a nudge towards the iconic move from the trailer. However, it still provides something unique, the ability to deal damage from afar. One could, of course, use guns, it is what it is. Swordmaster and Sword Typhoon cement this, as Sword Typhoon provides massive, self-centered AoE damage, while Swordmaster augments both with increased critical chance. Now, the latter opens up critical build options to a class that would be fitting for them, given its glass cannon nature. Moreover, said boost is restricted to those two skills, avoiding massive critical bonuses across the board, with no restrictions to keep them in check. Lastly, Sword Typhoon introduces a unique interaction that Whirlwind might not have hammered down. It has a large cooldown that can be reduced through gear. Given its design's immense power, Typhoon required players to invest in gear with the affix that increased the use rate of swordsmanship skills, an affix that would otherwise be ignored. Other standalone skills are Matched Blades, which allows dual wielding and increases strength, Heaven's Arc, that allows the player to deal with otherwise troublesome flying enemies, and Thorns, which reflected flat damage to melee attackers. To me, Thorns always seemed like the one skill that was lackluster even conceptually, but it too makes sense thematically. Now, lastly, since this is a very unique aspect of the class and has implications, auras. The player is only allowed to have one aura active at a time, and each of them offers a distinct bonus to justify its use, if not practically by the time one reaches the endgame, at least in terms of design. Aura of Power provides power regeneration, the way Balance of Power does. Aura of the Elements provides elemental strengths, not unlike Sword of Authority. Aura of Zeal provides critical chance and damage, building on Surge of Wrath and Swordmaster. Aura of Deflection and Aura of Vengeance both provide defense against projectiles, ranged attacks, a danger for a melee class. Now, Aura of Zeal is the one that interests me the most, practically anyway, as its implications can seep into the overall concept of critical builds. So on this front, the class offers Aura of Zeal, Surge of Wrath, and Swordmaster. All three are viable options, and each comes with drawbacks. Aura of Zeal prevents using other defensive auras. Surge of Wrath requires dealing many hits to keep it active, pushing the player on the offense, which can be dangerous when one plays a glass cannon class. Swordmaster only provides its bonuses to its own tree, notably Sword Typhoon, which in turn calls for gear that doesn't boost many other skills, since the other class skills have relatively lower cooldowns. Taking it a step further, all three cost many points to get and max. True to the rest of the design, choices matter, and not everything can be had at once. So acquiring all three, theoretically, would provide immense damage, but the player would have to lose any other aura that's not Zeal, and power sustainability, or healing, or single target offensive skills or debuffs, or mobility, or crowd control. And even then, the player would only really have Sword Typhoon approaching a crit capped state, and no other skills, thus ensuring balance and making sure that accuracy, the attribute that provides critical damage, does not become too appealing to the point where the class becomes too fragile. Flagship was visibly fond of the Templars as a faction. They focused on it during development, as seen in the 2007 making of video.
Game before, a full 3D game before. So we knew we had to develop our own engine from scratch. We had a lot of engine needs that other games don't face, like randomization of levels and 3D collisions using a mass amounts of characters and monsters.
They used it as a central faction in the lore.
So I sort of approached it like, let's start with the character classes. I figured the Templar were sort of the clearest. They were kind of central to the whole idea of what Hellgate was about. They're classic knights, but they've existed throughout time since the Middle Ages. They would have known about these demons for a long time. They would have been preparing for it, preparing for the invasion.
And even used it as a visual trademark for the game, both in promotional trailers and the special edition box art, probably given its unique aesthetics and art direction. It thus makes perfect sense that they would be able to create what I believe to be a stellar skill set for Blademasters, to the point where the class would be as powerful and as versatile as it was by the time of the TC. So that should be it. My kind thanks if you've made it this far. After what's now been a decade of active involvement with the game in one form or another, such pursuits interest me greatly. I can only hope that you, as a viewer and potentially a tester for London 2038, are as much as I am. Thank you for watching.